At the heart of an industrial revolution is an innovation that changes everything. Building AI Boston sees artificial intelligence as a renaissance. From the heart of innovation and the mecca of tech learning, we bring you AI for Real People, a conversation for everyone. Join us today for a deep dive into artificial intelligence with one of Boston's favorite educators, Mike Grandinetti. Mike is a successful serial tech entrepreneur across 8 startups, 2 IPO, and 7 strategic exits to acquirers, including IBM and Oracle. He is faculty at Harvard, Brown, Rutgers, and Carnegie Mellon in courses spanning AI, entrepreneurship, innovation, design, creativity, and product development. As an industry fellow at Babson, Mike is the creator of Babson Foundations in AI badge course for the entire Babson Community AI Exec Ed courses. He's the organizing committee senior advisor and annual panel moderator at the MIT CIO Symposium and a co-organizer at the upcoming HBS MIT Sloan AI Hackathon. This multi-award-winning professor is also a 3-time TEDx speaker, and we are getting schooled today from Boston to Davos and beyond. Welcome to Building AI Boston. I am your co-host, Anna DeVere, along with my lovely co-host and AI founder friend, Cara Peterson. Hello, Cara.
Hey, Anna. How's it going?
Good. You know, you and I are so thrilled to bring this remarkable, I'm going to just say Renaissance man, because you know that's my favorite word. Mike, welcome to the show.
Such a pleasure to be here with the two of you. Looking forward to a great discussion today.
Well, I'm happy to bring you in and representing Boston, but you are kind of a guy from all over, and you told me offline that you're from Brooklyn, so I'd love to find out a little bit about your origin story. And can you just tell me what is your kind of your influence as a kid? Anything you want to talk about? And I'm also really curious about like what is one of your favorite roles, because that lineup was illustrious, right? So
thank you. So I was born in an Italian neighborhood in Brooklyn, right? All of my my 4 grandparents came over from Italy during the Great Migration and went through Ellis Island. And my dad's family settled in Brooklyn. My mom's family settled in Boston. But my mom was one of 12 children, very traditional Italian Roman Catholic family. And she was really the only one to leave Boston to go and, start her life elsewhere. So Brooklyn was amazing because I grew up in this very Italian neighborhood, right? This was not the hipster Brooklyn of the $22, cafe latte. This was the melting pot Brooklyn of a very different era. And so I was very fortunate to sort of be in touch with my ethnic roots from my earliest days, and it had quite an influence on me. And so, when I think about my influences, my dad, of course, son of immigrants, first member of his family to go to university. And so a lot of the immigrant values that, right now we seem to be, for whatever reason, not really respecting, those were imbued in me from a very, very early age. So education was important. Work ethic was important. And so one of the things that happened to me very early on is I wound up having a paper route from the time I was 7 years old, because my dad said, if you want something, you got to go buy it, right? Not that he wouldn't support me, but he taught me some values that it's hard for us now with, upper middle income, families to be able to do that, right? And so I'm so grateful that he did that. So I was able to actually save up pay for my first car with cash when I was 16 years old, based on the paper route and a lot of other odd jobs. But what I have found is that entrepreneurs of my generation, it's amazing how many of them started off their careers, doing the old school paper route, not the stuff today where you throw something out of a van, but you're actually on your bicycle. And it teaches you a lot about responsibility and customer service. So it was a very formative thing for me. As a kid, education mattered greatly. So I was in 6th grade when some of my teachers started bringing me to their graduate classes. They saw something and said, would you like, obviously parental permission was granted. But I was literally starting to sit in on the back of graduate classes, starting in the 6th grade with some of my elementary school teachers, right? And so, it was just a joy to be able to do that. And then, another area that was very influential for me, I played the traditional American 3 sports, baseball, basketball, football. And you learned so much about teamwork and about leadership. Because we had some coaches that, even though their son was the worst pitcher in the league, they were our ace pitcher. Okay. They were going to start no matter what. Right. And you just sort of started to see a completely different sort of, domain of how people, led a team, from really great, generous, to very, very parochial minded. So I learned a lot about leadership playing sports.
Mm.
And I guess the last thing is I would say that the last influence for me really was in high school, Jesuit high school. A number of different teachers just instilled in me this passion for reading and this passion for learning, right? Pushed me way harder than I ever thought I could be pushed. And it just really created a love affair with learning that to this day still exists. So those are some of the influences that I think have shaped me and brought me to where I am.
Well, I'm so happy to hear that background, because I'm going to just speak for us on this panel. We're all the same age, pretty much.
Yeah.
And that's such an OG statement, right? And I think, and Cara can relate this, being from Mad City and really having that family and traditional values. And I appreciate the nod to immigrants. I appreciate the passion for history and story. But I guess you've got this unique perspective. A sixth grader in a graduate level class. Is teaching your favorite role of all the things that you do now?
It's such a great question. And I think the short answer, and as a musician will appreciate this, you look at a Ryan Adams, or you look at a Norah Jones, and you look at, or Brian Fallon, right? And they're all involved in a variety of different projects or groups because they have so many different dimensions to their personality. And so I would say, I can't tell you what's my favorite role, right? They're all my favorite role because they're so symbiotic and interconnected, right? And I'm a much better professor because I'm a practitioner. And my students value me bringing in, real world experience versus just, and to this day, there are still entrepreneurial professors who have studied entrepreneurship, received a PhD, but have never come close to touching a startup. And at the same time, I think I'm a much better co-founder leader because I thrive on being on the cutting edge of technology and management practices. So I think, I'm able to bring both of those together. I've been able to hire many of my best students into my startups. So to me, I couldn't tell you, I couldn't just do one. I've always needed to sort of have both of them side by side to feel like I'm living a full life.
Well, you're certainly in that unique Boston position. And I know Cara is going to ask all about Davos, which is really, for anybody that doesn't know, we're going to break that. We're going to break that down, right, Cara? Because this is just an incredible, and for somebody that's a leader, and again, as an educator, I would love it if my teacher got to go to this event. Let's break down what that is. Go ahead, Cara.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I totally want to talk about Davos because it's so important and so cool. However, I first need to say something about a paper route, if that's okay. So, okay, so this is totally unplanned. 2 paper route. Okay, so I was just sitting in a room at the Cambridge Innovation Center the other day for the Kendall Project, which is this local group that's putting together really cool training around AI. And so they did this little, warm up the group. And I'm not kidding, about half the people said, what was your first job? Wow. About half of them said paper route. So you are onto something there, Mike. Yeah. And then the other one, I learned a tough lesson in my life, my business life, through my paper route experience. So I have an older sister who is 1,000 times more crafty than I am. And when she was, we were in elementary school, I would say, she had a paper route and she subcontracted out to me the days she did not want to do and took a cut of my pay.
Oh my God. That is just brutal.
It is brutal.
But I learned a lesson, right? She's just sitting at home taking a cut of my work. I'm like, hey.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Now I understand you so much more.
Oh, that's hilarious. Cara, that is crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm sleeping in Saturday mornings. I'm on my, banana seat bike.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I see why you're so shrewd now. Okay.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm glad you shared that story. That's brilliant. This is a second first for you. First was inserting an infomercial for the first time in history into a Harvard Business School case study.
That's right.
And now being subcontracted out by your older sister to help her on the days she couldn't deliver.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
Belonging New
taking a cut.
England. Yeah.
Very, very, but she's a very crafty lady. So if she's out there listening, you did
Yeah.
teach me a few things, my dear.
I love it.
Okay, but we can switch now to when we think about where we learn lessons and where we learn
Yes.
about cool things happening in the world.
And so now MIT AI Day, John outdid himself this year. 26 panels and fireside chats with not a single break.
Wow.
Okay? So drinking from the proverbial fire hose, but it was worth it because his ability to attract, the most leading lights in the world of AI, it's unparalleled. And so you had Nobel laureate Demis Hassabis, who was the founder and CEO of Google DeepMind, won the Nobel for chemistry of all things because of the AlphaFold invention. You had the Turing Award winners, which is the Nobel of computing. So you had Jan LeCun and Yoshua Bengio there. You had Lemelson Award winners, including Ramesh Raskar from MIT, MacArthur Fellow winners, right? And so for the entire day, just hearing from the leading minds in AI, and there was a very strong sense of optimism. This was obviously, you would imagine, a techno-optimist crowd.
Right.
And so there was a lot of enthusiasm for where AI is heading. And it was broken down into a lot of different discussions, AI to improve the planet, AI to, help, educate the next generation of students. So MIT President Sally Kornbluth was there, interviewed by David Rubenstein, which is always a treat to see Rubenstein do an interview. The president of the University of Chicago was there. So there's a lot of talk about what would the high school students just, getting ready to go off now to university, how do they prepare themselves for an AI world? And clearly there's got to be a balance between philosophy or, the social sciences with a study of some kind of technology, data science, computer science, AI. So it was a very wide-ranging discussion. We had someone I know Anna is very familiar with, which is Will.i.am, really speaking forcefully about the impact of AI on the creative world and how much impact it's already having. So in general, a very, very stimulating event, and of course, a great way to build community as well.
And
Yeah.
Sorry, Anna, just a real quick. So it's also free, right? So of course it's expensive to get yourself over there and all this stuff, and you don't even want to think about what the hotel rooms cost, but it's a pretty, because it does sound, well, gee, that must be really hard to get into or cost a fortune, so this, I think, speaks to how, universities or nonprofits or big thinkers can kind of help democratize access to this stuff.
Absolutely. So yeah. And so the way that John organized it, you have to apply.
Right.
And you become what he calls an idea catalyst. And so the dome where this event takes place has about 200 seats in it, but the standing room around those seats, there had to be at least 3 times that many people sort of standing. Right. And there was a line out the door all day. Okay. A young mentee of mine started getting in line around noon, could not get in till about 5 o'clock when things were starting to slow down quite a bit. But yes, it is completely free. You just have to get yourself to Switzerland. And many of us decided to stay down the hill in Zurich. So rather than spending $5,000 a night on a hotel, we spent a lot less and, got up in, well before the roosters and the coffee shops, and took a 2.5-hour train ride up the mountain to be there for the 7:30 a.m. start time. And it was worth every second. Yeah. It was, it's just a group of like-minded people, right? We just had these amazing discussions at, 5 a.m. on the train, all the way up and then all the way back again later that night.
I think that's what I enjoy about the Boston ecosystem is this sharing of ideas. And, and I'm very interested in democratizing the conversation around tech. And I just kind of want to ask you, Mike, are you generally positive about the future? And then if you would, can you address the fears that most people have about job loss? Let's just take that preconceived notion about AI, that we're all going to be out of our job. And I can understand why that's really distressing to high school students and how we all are sort of floundering for an explanation. So from your point of view. What
Yeah,
do you
I
tell
am certainly optimistic, but at the same time, I have to say cautiously optimistic. But I really do believe that if people take agency and they're willing to learn how to coexist with AI, it's going to serve them. So let me share a few examples, right? So a very simple example is the company IKEA, company we all know. They're all over the world, right?
Mhm.
And so IKEA took about 1,000 of its customer support people and it upskilled them to become interior decorators, right? A far more satisfying and creative endeavor. And it allowed chatbots to do the vast majority of what we would call sort of that level 1 customer support. Okay. Very mundane work. We all know working in a call center is probably one of the least fun jobs that you can have.
Mhm.
And so here we see a company, very mainstream company, right? This is not a Silicon Valley tech company, able to generate an incremental $1.6 billion in revenue. Think about that.
Mm.
And at the same time, give employees a very different career role, right? So this is one company. Now, let me try to create a more big picture, which is what McKinsey has found. And here's one of the real big issues that everyone's saying, oh, you don't need to learn how to code anymore. First of all, that's complete nonsense. Okay. We need people that understand, how to architect systems. That's never going to go away. And so McKinsey did a survey of many, many different people using code assistant tools like Microsoft, GitHub, Copilot, and others. And what they found was those who were surveyed, and I don't have the exact numbers, but a material percentage of them went from they didn't really enjoy what they do to they enjoy what they do very much. And the reason is because a lot of those very mundane tasks that coders have to engage in, whether it be testing their code, debugging their code, documenting their code, right? There's nothing fun about that stuff.
Mhm.
And so when you automate a lot of the mundane things, then the second question that gets answered by the coders is, do you feel like you're in the flow state? And we all know as what an artist or creator knows when they're in the flow state. You are at one with, whatever it is that you're doing. And the percentage that said that we are in a flow state that we're not before has risen dramatically. Okay.
Mm.
So I do think that if we see these tools as cognitive assistants, not as, threats to our livelihoods, and we go in with that attitude, I think it's going to make all the difference in the world. Now, there will be dislocation, right? We'd be lying to ourselves if we said no.
Sure.
But we've seen throughout the industrial history from the 1780s with the first industrial revolution, right? There's always been a change in jobs, right? So you look at what Henry Ford did when he created the River Rouge plant in Detroit, right? And all of a sudden, factory workers were making the ungodly amount of $5 a day on an assembly line, and it allowed them to afford their own Model T. And so if we look at, more recent times, right, the number of jobs that exist today that didn't exist in the 1990s is very significant. So we don't need 1 million phone operators, plugging in the switchboard at the old AT&T long lines business. That's all done through computing today, right? And so I think this evolution continues, but, let's be honest, right? The average human does not like change.
No.
Change is something that very few people have a high level of comfort with. And so it's very easy to point the finger at the bogeyman and say, this is the next thing that's going to take my job. Right? And I just think fear is the worst way to embrace any change coming.
And we should say that even in like the case of the automobile, there were horse and carriage entrepreneurs that were blowing up roads as they got built to
Right.
So we know
Yeah.
we know that inherently it's stressful.
It's
You're
just
saying
like,
hold the line, right?
Yeah, it's just like putting tariffs on, vehicles coming from China. It's the same thing. It might buy us time, but it's not the world will not change.
Right,
Okay?
right.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I think about, and this, I love what you just said, and fear of change is so human, right? And it'll probably never go away.
Yeah.
But if I can just say, one of the things I do worry about is with a change this big, how are we having the right conversations about who's going to benefit? Because you can imagine all the the efficiency gains that we get, those could be distributed in different ways. It could be
Right.
distributed all up. So
Yeah.
really rich people get even richer, or it could
Yeah.
be distributed more broadly. So what do you think about that? Like, where are those conversations happening and where should they happen? And then I'll tie it back to our beautiful
Yeah.
state.
Yeah. I mean, you probably know that there's this huge AI summit happening in Paris as we speak.
Yes.
Right. And so I think, it's happening at Davos, right? It happened at Bletchley Park in the UK about a year ago. It's happening on the stages at places like MIT Day at Davos, right? It's happening. The question is it really finding its way into individual corporations, right? Because what I have seen as someone who's been advising corporations on the implementation of AI is how few of them still have any kind of AI policy, how few of them have actually trained their rank and file. So maybe the C-suite and maybe one level below are talking all the time about AI, but for whatever reason, I think they're afraid of a backlash. And so there's been this real gap between, their leadership on implementing policies and assuring people about what their future might look like, right? Because in the vacuum, people are they're going to take the worst imagination possible on that. So there's a lot of discussions. The question is, are they cascading down where they need to be, right? It's one thing to talk about policy at 80,000 feet. It's another thing to bring it into your respective company and put it into place.
Right, exactly. And that leads us right to then sort of thinking about, there's different sort of ways to look at your, and what is your ecosystem, right? Is it your company? Is it where you live? Is it sort of your, trade or whatever it is? So when I think about Massachusetts, right, where we live, this is Building AI Boston, right? There's a pretty special sauce, that we have in this state in terms of creativity and sort of social responsibility. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on having been many places in the world. What do you think makes our ecosystem a great place to build AI companies?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, it's a great place to create innovation, right? And of course, AI innovation is kind of, where we are today. But I mean, let's start at the very basics, right? I mean, think about, you have 250 or 300,000 university students coming into the city late August, early September, and hanging out here for the better part of 9 or 10 months. The energy and the enthusiasm is palpable. And they are looking at the world through a different lens, right? So they're willing to, just by the nature of their freshness, bring a very, very different perspective, right? We're certainly one of the most well-educated communities in the country, right? And if you're standing on a street corner or sitting in a small restaurant where you're, elbow to elbow with another table, we're not talking about the Kardashians here, okay? That is not the topic of discussion that you're going to hear.
Well, you would know. You hang out in SoCal, so you would know the difference.
Right. We're talking about stuff that matters, right? And listen, MIT and Harvard cast a very, very big shadow. But we can't forget we have 12 research universities in the greater, Boston area, right? 12 research universities. And a lot of people just don't really remember that. The density of our research universities is immense, okay? We have to go back to just after World War II, when the very first venture capital fund, as we know venture capital, which was done literally in 1946. This was not a bank. This was, we're going to take an entrepreneur that has no collateral whatsoever. And so MIT funded the first venture capital fund to the tune of $3 million, right? Today, people would laugh at that, right? SoftBank Vision Fund, $100 billion fund. So it was a $3 million fund. And Digital Equipment Corporation out of Maynard, Massachusetts, which was a very, very disruptive, competitor to IBM. They brought what was called the mini computer to the world, the DEC PDP and the DEC VAX, right? And this was the first time that, someone in the financial world took a bet on an entrepreneur and saw a company turn into a unicorn. Now, a unicorn in the 1970s is very different than a unicorn today. It was a real unicorn, right? So we've had 60 plus years of a robust venture capital community. And of course, because of the type of school that MIT is, they've always trained renegades, right? And so we've always had this amazing pool of, entrepreneurial talent and the courage that goes along with that. And now that has become mainstream. So it's basically everywhere. So to me, right, these are some of the, the anchor institutions that create this really special environment. And I think the other thing that I love, right, and it's sad to say, but it's very true, Silicon Valley casts such a long shadow. And I often will host delegations from different countries, right? And they'll spend a few days in Boston on their way to Silicon Valley, and they have no idea just how robust this ecosystem is. And then they spend a few days looking and they're in shock, right? And what I love about our community is we're not just high tech, we're education, we're healthcare, right? We're many, many different things. And I think that cross-pollination of all those different perspectives is also something that makes us really, really unique. So to me, it's, and I've lived in Silicon Valley. I just love the culture here. I love the diversity of thought and the character of the experiences that you have here. It is quite unique.
And I will vouch for that because I'm having the outsider perspective and having been in those conversations where there's 450 people in the room in Kendall Square with John at the helm, and just how exciting that feels to me. It's like I'm a character from Good Will Hunting, and I can't wait to say, me too. I love all this. I'd love to get into another subject, which I feel is probably a part 2, but we'll break it open just for fun.
Sure.
And that's the role of creativity and innovation, something very close to my heart. And I know for you too, is you're a teacher and you find that this is an important distinction you have to teach kids nowadays.
It is. And so, we go back to the great Sir Ken Robinson TED Talk. Still the single most viewed video on YouTube in history, more than Taylor Swift, more than Beyonce, right? Amazing. And what Sir Ken Robinson says is unfortunately very true. We peak in our creativity at around age 5. Okay. And the average elementary school, and I can tell you my Catholic schools certainly are guilty as charged, just drive conformity to a fault. And, it is really painful to see how innately creative we are and how we lose those skills by the time we're 15. So a lot of my course is about reclaiming your creative confidence. And what I would say is we are all creators, right? We were put on this earth to create. And there are very few things more satisfying to the human spirit than the ability to create. And I have a twin sister who's more artistic. But to me, right, to create a brand new company from a clean sheet of paper, to create a successful business model is an amazingly satisfying expression of creativity. The challenge is so many organizations are they act to prevent creativity at every stop. So I'll give you an example, right? So I have been teaching an exec ed course at UCal Berkeley called the Engineering Leadership Professional Program. And these are senior level engineering managers from names we all know, Google, Apple, VMware, Applied Materials, you name it, right? And when I do my mentoring sessions with them, I feel like I'm more their rabbi or their psychotherapist than I am their, professional coach, because to a person, they're complaining about all of the obstacles in their way to innovate, right? And these are supposed to be the guiding lights of the world. And so, creativity at scale is really, really hard. It requires incredibly enlightened and humble leadership where they don't believe they have all the answers, where, you have a culture of experimentation, where it's okay to fail because failing is learning, right? That's really all it is. It's just, this is one way that it doesn't work. So, more than ever, right, we're living in this BANI world. I don't know if you know this acronym. It's kind of an update of the VUCA acronym, but it's, we're living in a brittle, anxious, nonlinear, and incomprehensible world. The challenges are getting more and more complex. They're becoming more dire. And we're not going to solve these problems through brute force. It's going to require a human-centric approach. It's going to require a first principles approach. And organizations need to innovate, not just technically, but they need to innovate culturally if we're going to be able to solve some of these problems, right? How do you reimagine? So in my Harvard creativity course, the capstone project is a group of students will choose one of the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and they will look at a sub-goal and they will line around shared passion. And their job for the semester is to come up with a radically innovative approach to reframe how we're going to solve, any one of those 17 United Nations SDGs, right? So I think creativity has always been important, but now when we're working with bots and they can do a lot of the mundane stuff, we've got to raise our game. I think it's more important than it's ever been, personally.
I'm glad you said that, because I feel like that's the great fear, that, that creativity will somehow be obsolete along with all this automation. But thank you for breaking that down. And I'm sure there's a part 2 brewing in that. I'm just going to say, Cara agrees with that smile. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's incredible to talk to you, Mike. And thank you for your knowledge, but also your passion for history, preservation, culture, all the things you care about. I know I speak for all of us that we play a very important role in the future. And being the OG that we are.
Yes, absolutely. There's still room for us to contribute, right?
That's for sure. And anybody out there of a certain age, remember that.
Remember that. There's some wisdom doesn't come early. Okay, it's earned. Wisdom is earned. Context and perspective are important. Okay, and that symbiosis between the young, fresh perspective and the OG, wizened perspective is very powerful. You don't want to have one without the other.
Nope. And you see it every day. And we're really grateful you broke it down with us today. We're very much the beneficiary. Yeah, Cara?
Yeah, that was great. I just love hearing all the positivity linked back to the history too, because we know we've done some things right, we've done some things wrong, and that will be our pattern to go. But let's hopefully err on the side of more right things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, thanks for nailing it. That's our mission statement. We're complete with that. And please tune in next time. I know there's a part 2 brewing in this conversation with this panel. Thank you, Mike.
All right. Thank you, Anna and Cara. What a joy to spend some time with you, and love the opportunity to kind of share some of these thoughts with you today.
Thank you for joining us on Building AI Boston. Stay tuned for more enlightening episodes that put you at the forefront of the conversations shaping our future.